No sailor in the U.S. Navy fears the deep ocean as much as they fear the internal fire. The sea is the predictable, external enemy, cold, vast, and cruel. But fire is the intimate, internal betrayal. It is primordial chaos, caged within the very steel structure designed to contain it. Picture a Nimitz or Ford-class aircraft carrier, a 90,000-ton sovereign territory, a floating metropolis carrying up to 80 combat aircraft and powered by 2 nuclear reactors. This platform is a colossal projection of global power. But it is this very density, the millions of gallons of JP-5 jet fuel, the tons of high-explosive ordnance, the high-voltage electrical grid, and the 5,000 human souls, that transforms it into the perfect, isolated powder keg. At this precise moment, somewhere deep within the operational labyrinth, miles from the sun-drenched flight deck, something has gone wrong. Perhaps it's a rupture in a pressurized hydraulic line in the aft main machinery room, a Class Bravo hazard. Perhaps it's a catastrophic short circuit in an overheated cableway where miles of critical nerve lines converge, a Class Charlie threat. Initially, it's just the smell, acrid, insistent, and instantly recognizable. Then comes the sound, a faint hiss, a sharp crackle, and worst of all, a growing roar that sounds like a caged beast being given too much air. The instant the first smoke detector registers the lethal signature, the most complex, grueling, and deadly procedure the Navy has ever perfected begins. The collective fight for the survival of ship and crew against the Red Kraken. The stakes are unimaginable. Losing a single supercarrier is not merely a multi-billion-dollar asset loss. It is a strategic and human catastrophe. How do these 5,000 individuals, locked in a steel box miles offshore, defy the fate that physics and chemistry seem to have predetermined? The answer is found in decades of relentless training, in protocols written in the aftermath of fire and blood, and in the collective will that transforms every single sailor into an unrelenting machine of salvation. The clock starts now. The window of survival is slamming shut, and only the seamless integration of machine/protocol can defeat the chaos/randomness raging in the darkness below. The U.S. Navy constructs its vessels based on an immutable premise. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong during the height of battle or the fury of a storm. A catastrophic internal fire is the operational equivalent of being engaged in combat from within. The activation of the fire alarm does not trigger a simple siren. It initiates an instantaneous, multi-tiered response known universally as damage control, DC. Aboard an aircraft carrier, DC is not merely a department. It is a mandatory lifestyle, a non-negotiable, fundamental discipline of every single crew member. The first critical step is localization and assessment. Within milliseconds, a code is broadcast throughout the entire ship, detailing the location and classification of the hazard. Attention, attention! Fire, Class Bravo. Hangar Bay 2, Frame 180. Repair 5, man your stations. Every supercarrier is meticulously mapped into DC zones, each assigned to a specialized repair party. Simultaneously, and most crucially, the entire ship instantly transitions to Condition Zebra. Condition Zebra. This is far more than an alarm status. It is a physical and geometrical change to the vessel. Every watertight door, hatch, and ventilation closure not immediately required for operational necessity is rapidly secured and sealed. The objective is instantaneous compartmentalization to create impenetrable, fire-resistant cells. This protocol instantly turns the floating city into a series of isolated, airtight bunkers. Ventilation, the greatest vector for the spread of fire and smoke, is immediately controlled, often completely secured in the affected section to starve the nascent blaze of its vital oxygen supply. Concurrently, the initial attack team, typically members of the elite flying squad, specially trained DC professionals on 24/7 high alert, races toward the epicenter. They do not await orders. Their actions are honed by simulation and repetition down to cellular instinct. Technical specifications of damage control. 1. Fire classification. The Navy strictly categorizes the nature of combustion, as the wrong extinguishing agent can escalate a crisis. O-Class Alpha, a solid materials, paper, fabric, wood, extinguished efficiently with water, H2O. O-Class Bravo be flammable liquids, fuel, oil, JP5. Requires AFFF, aqueous film forming foam, or powder agents. Water here is useless or potentially disastrous, spreading the burning liquid. O-Class Charlie, C electrical equipment, demands non-conductive agents, such as CO2 or specialized gas suppression systems, to prevent electrocution and further damage. O-Class Delta, D combustible metals, rare but highly critical, requires specialized dry powders. 2. Double boundary containment. While the initial attack team engages the fire at the primary boundary, other DC teams rapidly probe the walls, decks, and overheads to measure the temperature in adjoining compartments. Their mission is to establish the secondary boundary 2 compartments away from the source. They must cool the structural steel to prevent heat from conducting the fire through the ship's skeleton. If the steel in an adjacent compartment reaches 650 degrees Celsius, 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, it loses 80% of its structural strength, and any stored ordnance begins the deadly process of cooking off. Fighting a fire on a supercarrier is not merely about spraying water. It is a tactical battle utilizing chemistry, thermodynamics, and structural integrity, all executed with surgical precision under immense pressure. Externally, the aircraft carrier is the very symbol of invulnerability. Internally, during a fire, it becomes a merciless furnace working actively against human physiology. This is the moment the perfection of the machine collides violently with the brute force of chaos. The primary killers in a confined ship environment are not the flames themselves, but the insidious byproducts, heat and smoke. 1. The thermal trap. Fire confined by steel bulkheads generates unthinkably high temperatures. Firefighting hoses may deliver thousands of gallons of water per minute, but in a narrow passageway, temperatures can spike to over 1,200 degrees Celsius, 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. These temperatures do not just burn. They instantly desiccate the lungs, rapidly melt synthetic protective gear, and induce sudden, catastrophic heat stroke. This is where the physiology of betrayal takes over. The human body, engineered for terrestrial survival, cannot cope with such rapid thermal transfer. DC teams work at the absolute limit of their physical capacity. They are allotted only 15 to 20 minutes of active time in the immediate hot zone before their core body temperature reaches the critical threshold, demanding immediate rotation. Time here is not measured in seconds, but in thermal load. 2. Toxicity and the limbo of smoke. The second, more pervasive killer is smoke. Despite all fire retardant materials, modern ships are packed with plastics, paints, cables, and liquids that, when combusted, release suffocating, lethal gases, carbon monoxide, cyanides, hydrogen sulfide. Smoke is not merely a respiratory hazard. It is a navigational failure. In a labyrinth of tight corridors and steep ladders, or ladders in Navy parlance, smoke instantly turns the environment into a black, disorienting void. Sailors are forced to crawl, navigating purely by touch, relying on pre-painted tracing lines on the bulkheads and the knowledge drilled into them. The immediate lifeline is the SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus. These units provide 30 to 45 minutes of clean, life-saving air. But under intense physical strain and high thermal conditions, this operational limit can shrink to 20 minutes. To locate the fire, execute the task, and successfully exit before the window of survival slams shut is an atrophied procedure operating on instinct, not rational calculation. In the critical minutes following the alarm, the 5,000 crew members divide into 2 essential groups: those actively fighting the fire and those awaiting rescue or orders. The survival of non-DC personnel relies entirely on their cellular discipline. They must seal their compartments, secure non-essential power, lay low on the deck to avoid rising smoke, and wait. Their survival is a passive but equally vital part of the protocol. They must not panic, must not compromise Condition Zebra by opening doors, and must not impede the DC teams working in their 30 kilograms of cumbersome protective gear. In this phase, the collective will, forged by decades of drill, pushes back against statistical cruelty. Every single sailor is a potential firefighter, trained to deploy an extinguisher and dog down a hatch. This is the price of duty, the capacity to execute your primary job while maintaining readiness for sudden, total war against the most elementary of enemies. The modern DC doctrine of the U.S. Navy was not conceived in sterile conference rooms. It was forged in the relentless heat of disaster. To understand today's almost reflexive discipline, we must return to the catastrophic precedent that fundamentally redefined the fleet's approach to survivability. The fire aboard the USS Forrestal, CV-59, in 1967. On July 29, 1967, in the Gulf of Tonkin, the attack carrier Forrestal faced the worst-case scenario. A stray electrical surge launched a Zuni rocket across the flight deck, igniting jet fuel tanks, which in turn triggered a chain reaction of bomb detonations. Many of the older ordnance items were filled with unstable, explosive composition. The result was instantaneous, unmitigated hell. The fire claimed 134 lives and wounded 161 others. The ship burned for over 24 hours. The subsequent forensic analysis concluded that the failure was not solely technical. It was a fundamental breakdown of the DC system when confronted with truly unimaginable chaos. The lessons of Forrestal. 1. Standardization deficiency. Before 1967, firefighting was often chaotic, a mentality of throw everything you have at it. Post-Forrestal, the Navy enforced the strict A, B, C, D classification system and mandated the use of only the correct chemical agents. Using water on a fuel fire was officially recognized as an act of escalation, not control. 2. Equipment evolution. The disaster highlighted the desperate need for rapid and efficient suppression systems. This ushered in the ubiquitous use of AFFF, aqueous film forming foam, which swiftly blankets burning fuel, effectively sealing off the oxygen supply, a critical advantage over older, less effective methods. 3. Cross-training. Shipwide DC, the most profound lesson was that reliance on dedicated fire marshals was insufficient. The enduring principle became, every sailor is a firefighter. From the cook to the aviator, every crew member is required to know how to locate a DC locker on the SCBA and deploy a portable extinguisher. This created the collective mind, a decentralized capacity for immediate self-rescue and containment. Modern aircraft carriers are constructed with layered defenses designed to decelerate the spread of the Red Kraken. Compared to vessels from the 1960s, they feature fire-resistant bulkheads, multi-layered construction, and specialized insulation drastically slow heat transfer. This buys the DC teams critical time, the difference between success and catastrophic failure, to establish secondary containment boundaries. High-capacity pumps. Carrier firefighting systems can pump tens of thousands of gallons of seawater per minute, providing an unlimited resource for boundary, cooling, and direct suppression efforts. Ordnance zoning and isolation. Ammunition is stored in specialized, climate-controlled magazines. Crucially, these magazines are equipped with systems that allow for immediate and total flooding if heat sensors indicate a critical temperature spike, isolating the explosive material from the spreading inferno. These technological and procedural advances expand the window of survival, transforming a potential 10-minute flashover catastrophe into a 10-hour controlled emergency. This evolution is the enduring price of duty paid for by those who perished on that fateful day in 1967. While the DC teams are locked in brutal, physical combat below, a highly sophisticated strategic chess game is being waged on the bridge and in the subterranean command post. The ship's commanding officer and the Damage Control Central, DCC, must manage the surrounding chaos, operating strictly by data, logic, and protocol. The urgency of command and control. The DCC, often referred to as the brain of damage control, receives a relentless torrent of information from every sensor, every repair party, and every affected compartment. Their task is to make high-stakes decisions that may seem counterintuitive but are absolutely necessary for the survival of the 90,000-ton vessel. 1. Maintaining stability and trim. When thousands of gallons of water are poured onto one side of the ship to fight a fire, the weight imbalance can cause the ship to list or roll. The DCC must issue orders for counter-flooding symmetrical compartments on the opposite side to maintain stability. This is a conscious trade-off, the calculated risk of controlled flooding against the catastrophic risk of capsizing. 2. Smoke evacuation strategy. When the fire originates in lower, inhabited areas, the DCC utilizes the powerful ventilation systems, if undamaged, in exhaust mode to create zones of negative pressure. This is designed to actively pull the toxic smoke away from critical escape routes or vital machinery spaces. This procedure must be executed with surgical precision to ensure that oxygen is not accidentally fed back into the burning compartment. 3. The sacrifice protocol. In the most extreme cases, when the fire becomes localized but completely uncontrolled and risks breaching the next boundary, the DCC faces the gravest decision: abandoning the affected space. They order the compartment to be permanently sealed, all ventilation and hatches secured, and then initiate the fixed firefighting systems, typically a massive, rapid discharge of CO2 or modern clean agents, FM 200 or Novec 1230. This process is designed to completely suffocate the fire by depleting all oxygen. This saves the ship at the cost of rendering the compartment's equipment irreparably damaged. In this moment, the aircraft carrier transcends its role as a mere warship. It becomes a gigantic, pressurized vault where salvation necessitates the conscious, systemic sacrifice of a part for the integrity of the whole. This centralized, strategic management of decentralized combat is the epitome of the unrelenting machine of salvation, designed to maximize survival odds, even when the environment is actively working to achieve statistical cruelty. Imagine the scene 12 hours later. The fire is localized, beaten down, but the compartment where it began is a smoking, melted ruin. The attack teams are utterly depleted, faces smeared with soot, their bodies having pushed past the physiological limit. Yet, the 5,000 crew members are alive. The ship, though scarred and wounded, remains afloat, its systems struggling but operational. Victory against fire on an aircraft carrier is not the elimination of danger. It is the subjugation of it. It is the ultimate proof that the collective, decades-trained human can stand against the wildest and most unpredictable form of chaos. Why does the Navy fight for every single inch? Why is abandoning ship not the immediate default protocol? 1. The asset value. The aircraft carrier is more than a ship. It is a strategic bastion, an asset valued in the tens of billions of dollars. It cannot be abandoned. It must be preserved as a war-fighting platform. 2. Nuclear accountability. Aboard an atomic-powered carrier, the DC protocol is intrinsically linked to nuclear safety. The paramount duty of the DC teams is to ensure that the reactor cooling systems remain functional to prevent a catastrophic core meltdown. Saving the ship is synonymous with averting an environmental and strategic disaster of global consequence. At the end of the day, when the flames are out and the long, agonizing process of dewatering and repair begins, the fundamental truth emerges. The aircraft carrier does not survive due to its 90,000 tons of steel. It survives because of the 5,000 individuals who, at the moment of ultimate crisis, function as a single, decentralized organism, where every person is prepared to sacrifice for the integrity of their shipmate's compartment. It is this sharp, brutal contrast between the colossal might of the floating city and the sheer vulnerability of a single person choking in a smoke-filled passage that defines the core of naval duty. The technology, the protocol, the AFFF, and Condition Zebra are merely the tools that successfully expand the window of survival. But the harsh, fundamental law of the sea remains unchanged. Only those who are prepared to meet the internal enemy with unyielding discipline will survive. A fire aboard an aircraft carrier is the definitive trial. And every time the fleet defeats the Red Kraken in the dark heart of the ship, it is more than a technical achievement. It is a profound triumph of collective will and the ultimate affirmation of the toughest philosophy in the Navy. We do not leave the ship because the ship is us. The final chapter of this ordeal is not the extinguishing of the last flame, but the cold, meticulous process of determining the cost of the debt. Every major fire incident, from the Enterprise fire in 1969 to the devastating blaze aboard the USS George Washington during its maintenance period, which resulted in significant structural damage and delays, serves as a grim reminder that DC training can never be static. The lessons learned from every near catastrophe are immediately integrated into the fleet's operational doctrine, reinforcing the concept of the unrelenting machine. The procedures evolve constantly. Improved thermal imaging gear to penetrate the black smoke, better automated foam systems in high-risk areas like pump rooms, and faster means of communication when primary circuits are melted by heat. For the sailor, the experience leaves an indelible mark. They emerge from the smoke not just as technicians, but as survivors who have faced the primary killer and prevailed. Their commitment to the protocol is absolute because they have seen the statistical cruelty of chaos up close. The price of duty is paid not in cash, but in the relentless hours of drilling, the simulated agony of smoke-filled passageway, and the understanding that when the real alarm sounds, the life of the ship and the lives of 5,000 souls rests entirely on their immediate, unflinching response. In the end, the supercarrier is a symbol of American power, but its true strength lies in its human factor, a collective resilience that transforms mere metal and protocol into the ultimate, self-healing machine of salvation.